Hey team, you're about to experience my interview with Matthew Holman. Matthew is the founder of the Subscription Doc, and he likes to say that he has the subscription prescription. He specializes in all things e-commerce subscriptions for both D2C and B2B brands. And we had a fantastic conversation about the opportunity for subscription-based purchasing and selling as a B2B merchant. We dig deep into the opportunities for B2B merchants to level up their game by offering auto-fulfill, auto-ship, auto-replenish opportunities to their customers and what that does for their business and how it makes it easier for their customers to buy from them on the regular. We had a great conversation. He's a fantastic speaker. He knows his game inside and out, and I learned a ton, and I think you will too. Enjoy. Welcome to B2B Commerce Corner. Commerce Corner is a sub-series of the E-Commerce Edge podcast discussing all things B2B commerce through the lens of agencies, consultants, merchants, and more. Enjoy. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Pod. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome Matthew Holman to the podcast today. Welcome, Matthew.
Hey, Jason.
Super cool to have you along for the ride today, mate. We've been connected on LinkedIn for a number of years now, and I've always known you as the subscription guru. You're like the subscription guy. Anything to do with subscriptions, whether it be your own content or jumping in and commentating on other content that has to do with subscriptions, to your work with QPilot. We featured QPilot on the podcast before, to all of the private work and consulting work that you do around subscriptions. You are like the subscription guy. So how the heck did you get into this space?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually started out in the logistics space. I originally wanted to be a marketer, wanted to be in e-commerce space. I actually got into kind of one of those funny routes where I went to got a tech degree and then ended up doing marketing for a tech company. And so I was like thinking that marketing wasn't necessarily going to be my calling, even though I've always loved it because I was a little bit older, trying to break into the biz. And I ended up in there in the logistics space. And I will make this joke, if I can make explaining cubic USPS priority mail shipping like at least half interesting to read, then I could probably write content about just about anything. And so from there, I actually got introduced to subscriptions through David Bradley and QPilot because QPilot's very logistics focused. So for me, I've always had a big passion around enabling things, education, trying to make things work that seem overly complex, and subscriptions like logistics are one of those things. And when we talk about the B2B space, I think it's vastly underserved from both a technology and a service side of things. So it's something that we've always connected on and had some great conversations on as well.
You've absolutely hit the nail on the head. I think subscriptions, at least from an e-com perspective, have always been considered to be almost the exclusive domain of B2C and D2C merchants. And I actually am seeing, because over the last few years, I've just doubled down on the B2B space so heavily, and there's just so much opportunity there. And B2B e-commerce in particular is probably a decade behind where D2C and B2C is today. And as a result of that, I think that, like you said, subscriptions, particularly in the B2B world, are not only underserved, I think, from a technology perspective, but even from a knowledge perspective and
Right.
understanding how and where subscriptions can really help a B2B business level up their game, bring more predictable revenue to their business, bring more predictable logistics delivery and follow through to the B2B buyer, customer. And we're seeing this really start to become a bigger part of the mainstream discussion around B2B e-commerce. I'm seeing it more now than I've ever done before, but we're B2B merchants that are coming to me and saying, hey, we want to do this e-commerce thing, but we have a component of our business that we'd love to put on subscription because, say, for example, let's say we supply products to hospitality, for example. And okay, we have these customers that just come into our website and they order the same stuff, or they have an account manager and they send us the same CSV once every week, once every 2 weeks. We have to manually put that order into our ERP and then it gets fulfilled from there.
Right.
It's becoming a much bigger part of the equation, isn't it?
It is. And if you think about the typical B2B purchase experience, it's often invoices, emails, CSV files, right? We're talking about, especially for things that are on a repeat basis, while within the D2C space, we're seeing this innovation around a portal and you get a text message and you confirm if you want that quantity or if you want to change the flavor. And it's all very fast. It's all very quick. And so one of the things that I think is really exciting is the innovation around that technology and that experience. But I think part of the problem too is we lack the right terms for it. So if you think about it, if you're selling like you mentioned, hospitality, I was actually talking to a friend of mine about this yesterday because he got a tattoo, and one of our customers is a tattoo recovery place. They sell D2C and B2B. They sell to tattoo shops that want to sell it to their end users, and they sell it directly online. And so the idea is, what do you call that? Is that a subscription? Would you really subscribe to get supplies? Would you really subscribe to get like a certain amount of steel delivered to your warehouse each week, or these amount of widgets or something like that? So when you take a step back though, and as you mentioned, it's like looking at how many repeat purchases are happening. How many times is it the same? Or do I have the inventory flexibility where I can show a customer, hey, this is what's available right now to ship today? And you can just go in there and pick what it is because you've already have a contract with me. There's already, because the beautiful thing about a subscription is that you're tokenizing a subscription payment or a credit card payment, excuse me. So you can just go and hit that over and over again. So there is options where you can put in alternative payment methods and invoicing and things like that. But that is the nature of lensing the B2B relationship is, what am I getting on a regular basis or close to the same thing on a regular basis? And how can I make that relationship more automated, more streamlined? And that gives predictability, not just to you, the end user, or the B2B company who's looking for those supplies, but your suppliers as well, because now they can plan out ahead. If they know that you're planning on buying 50 of something every week for the foreseeable future, they're going to start making sure they have more and more of that on hand.
And I find that when we change the terminology even slightly to make it more appropriate for the B2B world, all of a sudden light bulbs go on and
Right.
it's almost like they found the Holy Land. And if we use terms like auto ship or auto fulfill, if we are auto replenish, if we use terms like that in the B2B world, which is just a fancy way of saying it's a subscription, it's an
Right.
analog to the subscriptions we have in the B2C and D2C world, whether I'm getting bags of dog food delivered to my house once a month as a regular consumer, or I'm getting steel automatically delivered to my engineering plant on a regular basis. It's exactly the same model. It's just we have to use terminology and concepts that are more appropriate for the business model that we're playing in, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then one I would add is, as well as thinking about things through the lens of just in time, right? This idea of we want to be able to get something when we need it. And the gap is, again, the gap, if we think about the typical experiences, is, hey, I've got a deadline in 3 days. And in the past, I've been able to buy from the supplier and get something 3-day freighted to me. So I send them an email or ask for a quote. They don't have it. So now I got to go looking somewhere else. Whereas if that relationship is there, and even if I'm just regularly pushing that date out, oh, actually, we need it a few more days later, or we're going to need it in 2 weeks, but we are planning on using this. So that data is being passed back to your supplier. They can plan for that accordingly and hopefully save you on shipping because you don't need to pay for a rush freight charge.
And I'm starting to see more B2B focused subscription platforms, technologies be brought to the fore now, where even 5 years ago, that was not the case. We had to almost adapt B2C subscription technology platforms. We had to adapt those for the B2B environment and change all the terminology, connect everything up via API because the UI was designed for an end retail consumer. But now there are technology platforms like QPilot and others that are starting to really bring a more bespoke subscription experience to the B2B world to match everything that's available in the B2C world off the shelf. And I'm thinking back in the early days, many years ago, I was working to build bespoke subscription technologies for retail brands because there was really nothing off the shelf. If we go back a decade ago, there was very little off the shelf subscription technology that was worth anything. And so when we were thinking about building as agencies, for example, we were building these bespoke technologies for subscriptions where we were plugging in the payment methodologies and the tokenization. We're doing that all manually. We had to think about things like pause, resume, cancel, forward notifications. We had to think about, okay, we have a customer that's got 2 or 3 separate subscriptions with us running on different cycles, but they now want to merge those all together because they
Right.
started those cycles at different times. And so they need to be able to go into their control panel to manage their subscriptions and say, no, I don't want these 3. I want them harmonized, and I want the first shipment of the harmonized to be on this date, and then every 2 weeks or every 21 days or every 30 days after that. So we would give them the flexibility to control, okay, do I want this delivered on a daily cycle, a weekly cycle, a monthly cycle, etc. So I'm really empathetic to anybody who
Right.
chooses to try to go out there and build subscription software of any variety, but particularly when we're trying to tailor that for the B2B world, because I know just how complex in the effort to make the front end simple, you make the back end much more complex, don't you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the use cases we saw with BigCommerce was this idea of people want to be able to spend, they want to be able to buy, say, 6 months worth of supplies all at once, but they only want it shipped in 6 pieces month over month, right? Because they don't. So that's another use case. I think what I like to give a lot of credit where credit's due, with all of its flaws, the Shopify's and BigCommerces of the world have created a standardization around how we're thinking about inventory, how we're thinking about payments and some of those things, which has greatly simplified a lot of the complexities of B2B repeat purchasing, right? You mentioned payments. Inventory has always been a really big one because it's like, how am I going to be able to see what's in your system or not, what's available or not? How am I going to be able to calculate freight or just regular drop shipping quickly because of those things? So that standardization has certainly made it easy. And I think some of the innovation that's happening around the customer experience, how quickly people want to be able to make choices or changes or be able to see something, see if it's available or not. And that's what's also fun to see. There's so many innovations happening within the inventory space right now with how you're able to be able to see your supplier's inventory and inside your own system so that you can pick and order things. There's just a lot of amazing innovations. EDI is still alive and well, but it's slowly getting chipped away by these new systems that are coming out.
And I think there's two other areas where I'd love to get your thoughts on where it's unique in the B2B world. So in the B2B world, let's compare and contrast this. So in the B2B world, price is an attribute of the customer. In the B2C world, price is an attribute of the product, right? So in the B2B world, we have contract pricing, we have price lists, we have restricted catalogs, we have all sorts of unique things in terms of how we interface with the customer and generate pricing, all the way from quoted pricing, list pricing. There's a number of tiered pricing, volume pricing. There's a whole bunch of complexity that comes into the B2B world, and that directly affects any subscription platform or plan you would choose to implement. Because let's say someone's buying on a subscription, again, auto-fulfill, they have their normal price list price, but let's say now, company-wide, across all price lists, you're putting something on a 10% discount. You don't want to charge them the subscription pricing. You now want to make sure that at the point of fulfillment, or at least at the point of billing, that they're actually getting the most preferential pricing available to them. So when we think about the additional complexity in the B2B world, we now need to be querying usually multiple systems before the billing can take place for that shipment. Whereas kind of in the B2C world, this is our current price for that product. That's when we create that order for you dynamically based on your subscription, that's what you're going to get charged, right? It's not necessarily, very rarely is it, okay, you contracted for 6 months worth of subscription at this previous price, and the price goes up and we're just going to eat that price increase. That's not the way it works. You just get charged the current price at the time and then we ship. In the B2B world, because there are so many contractual obligations around pricing, now all of a sudden we need to query multiple systems before we create that auto ship scenario, right? And that brings a lot of complexity. So first of all, I'd like you to speak to that. And then second of all, thinking about the complexity of having a subscription for both digital and physical goods on the same subscription. So those are two real big complexities, right?
Yeah. The first one is interesting, right? And I'm just smiling over here because you're outlining one of the biggest problems that exist in subscriptions right now. And so Shopify, for example, has a really hard time lensing different pricing like that. Like a product, the pricing is attached to the product, as you mentioned. So it's difficult. You can sometimes get away with special coupons or other things even on the D2C side. When we're talking about user-based or role-based pricing or company-based pricing, that's why some companies are having to implement like massive systems like NetSuite and other things to try to work around that within Shopify's parameters. That is one of the I think we've had this discussion online before too, right? The differences between WooCommerce and Shopify. So Magento, WooCommerce are great at this. They're not so good at a lot of other things, but they are great at managing this type of pricing. BigCommerce, I think, is doing a better job than Shopify. And Shopify it's hard to say how much headway they're going to make on that in the near future. I hope that they understand if they want to win on the B2B side, they're going to have to figure that out. So yes, that is one of the issues. And that's why people often bring in alternate systems that can hold that type of pricing information separately from the Shopify ecosystem, and then inject that as an order into there. Even then, you can sometimes run into some issues. So that is obviously a really big problem. And one of the reasons that's holding back like the fast digitization of that experience. And unfortunately, I don't have necessarily an easy example other than to say there are, like, again, outside of Shopify, The Sanoderm company that I mentioned, they were running earlier, that tattoo supply company, they were running a Shopify side for their D2C, and they were running WooCommerce for their B2B for a while, just because that's literally the reason why, or one of the main reasons why. So that's definitely a problem, and one that we watch closely. Everyone I know is on this side is watching closely to see how that kind of changes or improves. The only other way, I guess we could sit and pontificate about or ideate on a lot of different possible solutions, but it gets fairly complex. And I would say pay attention to your use case, and sometimes maybe if there's a way to simplify that. The second question, it's very interesting. I think the idea, if we're thinking about it, is if we start thinking about offers, right? What we're trying to sell, what we're trying to give to somebody. And we're thinking about there's a physical and a digital component. A really good example of this might just, let's use Amazon because they're probably the easiest example for everybody to understand, right? You might have an Amazon Prime membership that gives you access to 2-day shipping, all of the perks, the digital platform, the content, all those things. And then you might actually, through Amazon, buy a physical subscription to vitamins or cleaning supplies. They actually have a B2B subscription offer now. So the idea is you have two different things that are happening, but what brought you to the platform first? Was it the product? Was it the membership? Maybe it was a mix of both. Maybe you bought the product a few times, saw yourself using it a little bit more, and now the membership makes sense. And so the easiest way for me to try to explain this and think through like customer experience, and this is a conversation I have with a lot of businesses, D2C and B2B side, is what is the primary reason people are coming to your site, right? Are they coming to buy the steel shipment? Are they coming to buy the widget that you're selling? Or are they coming because there's something bigger or better you do on the digital side, or there's a digital component? And that's how you want to start with the offer, and then thinking through how you can upsell those as different opportunities. It is probably one of the simplest ways to think about it. Another good example might be, if we're thinking digital, might be thinking about those discounts you mentioned with the different pricing roles. So you might be able to offer somebody site-wide 20% off if they commit to paying $1,000 a year to being part of your membership. And that includes like priority support, maybe an offsite, your dedicated account rep, plus say 20% off all your products. On top of that, you now have products that you're physically selling as well, and that you're trying to get them to subscribe to. So in that instance, people are coming for the products, but then you want to upsell them that experience from a digital perspective that empowers that. And there are a lot of other examples of thinking through that. So it just depends on what you feel like is your core business. That's where I would start. And then you come in and you start adding the other component. Otherwise, it's just too complex on the D2C or the B2B side for people to see, oh, wow, there's all these things happening. There's all these different choices. What should I pick? Because I'm not sure what I should be choosing.
And I'd love to know your thoughts on an evolution that I'm seeing in the industry too, which is to have maybe the digital subscriptions being owned and run by one system, and having the physical product subscriptions owned and run by a separate system. And both of those systems are designed and tailored to handle those really well and handle those quite independently of each other, because they don't really necessarily always need to overlap. And I'm thinking of, in simple terms, let's use something really simple. Maybe you use Inveterate, for example, to manage your membership program, and you manage that you use that platform to manage the billing for the memberships, the recurrence of the membership. Because it oftentimes then becomes that takes control of the loyalty efforts that someone takes and what they get, the benefits they get over on top of the subscription fee that they pay for that. Maybe as part of that, they automatically get free shipping. Maybe as part of that, they automatically get early access to products. There's certain things that they get with that paid membership model that's not necessarily directly tied to a physical good. And then over and above that, somebody in the B2C world might be using bold subscriptions, for example, to manage their physical goods subscriptions. Again, going back to that dog food scenario, I want dog food delivered once a month, and I want to be able to pause, resume, add. I want to be able to manage all of that for the physical goods, and bold subscriptions makes that super easy for me as a consumer to do that. But I wouldn't want to manage that through an Inveterate, because that's not what it's designed to do. And I'm seeing that similar sort of parallel model be looked at really closely in the B2B world now too, where they have a membership model where they get some tangible benefits by being a member of their program, their equivalent of Prime, if you will. And then they have for their physical goods, they have a completely separate system. Maybe it's QPilot, maybe it's something else that manages their physical goods subscriptions. And then they integrate that into their other systems via API to guarantee things like the customer gets their preferential pricing, the customer can still request a quote as part of their physical product subscription, because now for this one instance of the subscription delivery, we want to have 5 times the volume on that given subscription order. So
Right.
I'm seeing the B2B world look at B2C and say, these guys have got it figured out. They've figured out how to run these kind of digital and physical programs in parallel with no conflict between them. And I see the B2B world taking notes here.
Yeah, I would say I'm seeing that, and I'd say two paths diverge in the wood. So this is an argument that's happening very much in the SaaS space right now, because at the same time you're mentioning there's very specific platforms like Inveterate that are coming out. You're also seeing the Recharges of the world, the Yotpos of the world that are rolling out their own version of membership. So if you think about it, if you have a customer base of several thousand or 10,000 or 20,000 customers that are all buying software from you, and you know that what the rest of their software stack is, you're going to start trying to roll out features to try to take market share from some of those other apps, right? That is happening. And the difference for me, and this is an argument that I get in all the time, because people ask me all the time for subscription app software recommendations. I get asked about software recommendations all the time. And where I get crickets is when I ask, what are your main use cases? What are the top 2 or 3 things that are most important for that business? And when I don't get a response, or people aren't able to confidently tell me what that is, that's when I reply with, what are you using? Because it sounds like whatever you're using is actually probably fine. You just either don't know how to use it correctly, you don't know that there's actually a feature out there that's on it, or you're going to pay all these high switching costs and for something that does nothing better than what you're already on. And so that exists inside both spaces, right? And if anything, B2B can be a little more notorious for using legacy systems that they don't quite understand, or seeing a bright new shiny toy that everybody's using, right? Especially in MarTech and things like that, and they switch to it. So I would say, yes, it comes down to understanding, like you mentioned, because specifically Inveterate is a great example. They're doing something right now that's a little bit different. They're offering cashback as part of their membership options, right? That's not really available on some of these other software options. So if you feel like that's a compelling thing you want to offer your customers, and the reason is because from talking to them, that cashback would be motivating to them, or it would give them a little bit extra incentive because they're buying similar products in other places, right? So you're trying to give cashback as a reason. If you're getting cashback here versus here, you're going to buy from this store. That's a main tipping point. If you're seeing that happen, okay, that makes a lot of sense. Inveterate is worth the investment then, right? Additional software costs, additional tech stack, support issues. There's management costs that go along with that. Otherwise, the Bold has a membership option, right? If you're using Bold subscriptions, if you're using Yotpo or somebody else, there's other options that you can use, because, hey, we just want to be able to we just have a loyalty program. We give people points. We take people out to a movie every quarter or something like that. Okay, no big deal. And so that's really the ultimate answer, is always going to be thinking through your use case, what's driving the most important within the subscription space, especially. There's so much parity in features with some main key differences. But for example, Yotpo is a software that's rolling out a lot of things they're going after. In addition to loyalty, SMS, email, they're now in subscriptions. If you don't do a ton in the review side, from a subscription standpoint, might not make sense, right? But if you have a lot of people that are leaving you reviews, a lot of people that are often engaging with you socially because of that, Yotpo has a couple of cool features for converting people from reviews onto the subscription side of things.
Yeah, and I think a lot of brands get hung up on, okay, where is the confluence happen between maybe a digital subscription, loyalty, referrals, and physical goods? Where does that, because they all have to play together in some way, because your customers, whether they're B2B or B2C, they want some sort of benefit for that long-term commitment, that what they perceive as some element of lock-in. And I feel like as long as you're thinking strategically, as you pointed out, and say, okay, we're gonna roll these things out as a process, and we're gonna start small, because we're gonna eat the elephant one bite at a time, because there's absolutely no point in trying to roll out a membership program, trying to roll out a subscription program, trying to roll out a loyalty program. Yeah, I think what you point out is absolutely accurate, that because usually subscriptions of any type, or memberships or loyalty, are a commitment by the brand for a sustained period of time, if you just throw something at the wall to see what sticks, you're probably going to get yourself in trouble. Because if you go to all the effort to implement these programs, these technologies, the software, plus you get customers committed to them, if you decide to change the program 6 months after you started it because it's unsustainable for you as a business, you're going to run into trouble.
Yeah, I would say anybody on the B2B side, the especially going into some part of the like the digital transformation is think through, challenge some of these core assumptions around what people why you think people are buying from you. Like the old school madmen were buying because of a relationship, or we like these guys, or they always reply to my emails. That might be important, but it might actually not be the most compelling thing, right? If what you're selling is a quality experience, that's great, but how are people accessing that experience or those products, right? So challenge those assumptions, because what you're going to find as you do that, this happens all the time. We could do an entire podcast just running through examples of brands that thought people were buying because of reason A, and they found out it was reason B. Is you're going to start to unlock something that's the most important component of any subscription or repeat purchase experience. And this idea is, who is your best customer? Any business, whether it's B2B, B2C, we all carry a lot of dead weight, right? You're going to have the Pareto principle. There's going to be 15 to 20% of your customer base are going to be driving the majority of your revenue and your profits, right? And you're going to have salespeople or marketing or other things that are chasing all these other things that are actually not driving real revenue for your business. The goal of a subscription is to uncover what you can sell in a way that is extremely valuable to people, so much so that you don't have to use discounts all the time to make it happen. So I mentioned things like dedicated support, right? Guaranteed replies within an hour or something like that, right? So there are certain types of businesses that are going to really respond to this type of thing, right? Is a company more interested in buying with an invoice versus a credit card, right? If you have a lot of your customers that are using credit card, then employing something like a cash back experience, or they're using invoices and they're not used to getting cash back, maybe that's a really compelling offer for them from a loyalty or a digital membership standpoint. But that's the goal, is challenge the reasons why you think people are buying. You can do this through actual conversations with your customers, surveys. You can run some micro tests to see how that's working. That's going to let you identify on the software side what's actually going to enable that experience. And I'm telling you with 100% certainty that you're going to start to identify things that you don't need as part of your process that aren't important. And suddenly you're going to see an ad for something that does what you think you now need. And you're going to be able to find a new software that's going to be able to enable a lot for your business.
Hey team, I have a big favor to ask you. Please pause this episode and send the link of this episode to someone you know that you think would enjoy this content. Really appreciate you spreading the word. This is how we grow. We're not a Joe Rogan. We don't have big, massive advertising budgets, but we absolutely want to grow. We want to get the learnings from all of these episodes out to as wide of an audience as possible, and we need your help to do it. Thank you, and now back to your listening. And I think you raise a super relevant point, particularly in B2B land, which is that the onboarding process to become a B2B buyer with most B2B suppliers, it's pretty rigorous. It's pretty onerous in some respects. You've got to apply for credit. You have to go through a full-blown application process. You have to be onboarded into their systems. Your account usually has to be created in their ERP before you can even buy off of them.
Right.
It's oftentimes, it can take a week to be onboarded into a B2B supplier's database so that you can actually even purchase off them if you even can. And then oftentimes you start out with a low credit limit. You start out with a really narrow subset of the catalog that you can purchase. There's a whole lot of restrictions on who you can buy from and how you can buy from them. And I think to your point, if you can make that process that little bit easier, and you can actually have stock in stock, the whole in stock thing is just as important in B2B land as it is in B2C land, maybe even more, particularly on a repeat supply perspective. And with global logistics being the mess that they are today, that being able to even source the product in the first place becomes really important. And by offering subscriptions for your physical products, you now all of a sudden are going to be able to better forecast the inventory holding requirements you're going to need in the future. And all of a sudden, now you become the supplier of choice just because you now have the inventory when your customer actually wants it. And it's almost like you're performing a magic trick to the buyer, but actually, no, we already know forward looking, we have these 10 subscriptions for this SKU, and we know we're going to need a minimum of this amount of inventory to fulfill these pre-orders in advance, because that's effectively what we're talking about here. Subscriptions are pre-orders. That's what they are. And so you can do much better inventory planning if you've got those subscriptions in place. And all of a sudden, you now become the default supplier of a given good just because you are better than everybody else at making sure you've got the inventory that your customers want when they want it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say with subscriptions, especially on the B2B side, it's often it's not the same experience. I'm not going to buy, like I go to buy pet food, I buy it online from this one place because I get an extra 10% off. That's great. You don't need to incentivize people on the B2B side with the same level of discounts, right? You can keep your same pricing structure, your same discount, your same user based pricing that you've been using. But subscriptions allow you to create a different type of engagement and relationship, automation, accountability, insight, forecasting, as you mentioned. And those types of things are incredibly valuable, especially as you move up market. And we're talking about orders in the 50, 100,000 or even more of bottom line cost. So those types of purchases are incredibly important, and just small differences about when they can show up are massively impactful on a business's bottom line.
And also, you now, because it's very rare for a product distributor in the B2B world to be the only distributor of that product.
Right.
Usually they've got competitors of their own. Sometimes they've got exclusivity, but oftentimes they don't. And so oftentimes these B2B buyers, they might be signed up to two distributors of that good to make sure they always have supply. But if you offer the far superior experience, not only are you usually going to be the preferred person that they set up that auto ship with, because all of a sudden now you offer it and the competing distributor does not, but also now all of a sudden you become almost like the default industry wide, and you're going to experience much less churn of those B2B customers looking for that next better offer down the road. And like you said, because it's not usually about price in the B2B space, because distributors oftentimes are very competitive on price with each other. They know what the other distributors are selling those goods
Right.
for, and they're not going to lose massively on price. But if across an entire catalog of items, if you're a little bit more expensive than the alternate supplier, but the convenience of getting all of those items through one supplier and having
Right.
one relationship to manage and one auto ship experience to manage, oftentimes that's all it takes. And like you said, the B2B world is just simply not as price sensitive as the B2C world is.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And again, that comes down to thinking about when we're getting into the assumptions about why people are buying from us, like understanding that experience, what's important to that particular subset of customers. And again, I would urge any business to start paying a little bit more attention into what's your best, biggest, most popular with your own company's customers, what makes those qualities them. Is it batch size? Is it the SKU that they're ordering? Is it how they're using it? There's a lot of different attributes you can look at and you start paying attention to. And then once you start to uncover some of those, that's what you start to focus on with others. So like you mentioned, like the onboarding and vetting process, right? For new buyers, if you find that our best purchaser actually small batch on a weekly basis, and somebody comes along and says, hey, we're going to order once a quarter in large batches. Okay, this is our process for that. And that might not work for those large batch buyers, but you know what? We've identified from our side that small batch frequent purchasers are incredibly efficient and profitable for us. And so that's the experience that we're going to build. And that's who we're going to go after and who we're going to want to talk to. And if we meet a large batch buyer, we're going to educate them on a little bit about why this is it. But that's it. And it's sometimes hard for businesses to think that way because you don't like this idea of turning away revenue. But if you think about all the costs that you put in to try to manage multiple experiences, the friction that happens when it doesn't work, all these other things that come up, build the experience for your best customers.
Because you can't be all things to all people no matter how hard you
Cannot.
try, right? You have to operate in a niche. And the better you can nail that niche, the better off you're going to be. And do you suggest to your clients that are investigating some sort of auto ship or subscription model for their business, do you suggest that they not only look at their existing buyer data and using the Pareto principle, try to identify the 20% of customers that are driving the majority of the revenue? In addition to that, do you recommend that they also just simply start canvassing and talking with their entire customer base and say, hey, look, we're looking at introducing some sort of auto ship, auto fulfill, auto replenish model within our business. And we're just trying to assess how we could make that the most useful, most valuable it could be for you, our valued customers, and to do like a bulk canvassing. Maybe it's a bulk questionnaire with 3 questions or something like that, because it feels like some of those customers that today may not be your best customers, but if you offered auto ship or auto replenish, they might become some of your best customers. So it feels if you only look at your existing high value customers, that you might miss some information as you look to set up this model or this new offering that you're going to put a big investment into. If you want to get great ROI, it feels like you're going to want to canvas as widely as possible at the same time.
No, absolutely. I think from a personal, like one-to-one discussion, you should obviously start with your largest customers because you're going to have relationships there. People that are smaller might not be as likely to pick up the phone kind of thing. But Yeah, I would actually say that you should start by asking not just what we're going to be implementing this, but what do you not like about this experience, whether it's in general or with us, right? Ask people what they don't like, ask people what they think could be better, what do they wish that could be different. Ask open-ended questions is another great way. I've done some research on the best way to form questions and things like that. So open-ended is not always ideal, but I would say within any subset of questions, you want an open-ended one to give people opportunity to rant or to say really nice things, because that's where some of the magic is going to happen, is in that as an opportunity. But yes, canvassing, we're thinking about doing this, or we'd like to do this. What do you think about this? What do you like or not think about your best B2B purchase experience? What are those elements? What are those things? And start to see what people are saying. And yes, sometimes people can say, I like the fact that I can pick up the phone and you're always there. Okay. Maybe that isn't necessarily a great auto ship opportunity for you, and that's okay. But there might be other things you can do to automate that or make it important. Or, hey, we're going to try this auto ship thing, but there's 24-hour customer support on the phone or something like that. There's other ways you can supplement that to make it still work and make those people as part of that experience be happy.
And do you find, as we're coming to the end of our time together, and I super appreciate your knowledge and experience in this space, it's so valuable for businesses out there that are looking and staring down the barrel of how do we try to emulate some of the D2C experiences out there to make our B2B experience better. And this is one of those key ways I think of doing that. Do you find that most B2B brands that implement some form of auto ship for the very first time, that they do some form of incentivization when people adopt that? Because it's obviously more beneficial for their business. It brings economies of scale to their business. It brings forecasting to the business. They don't have as much dead stock, et cetera, et cetera. And in the D2C world, this tends to be common, right? Either they get
Right.
an automatic discount on the initial purchase that is auto ship, or they get a discount on the lifetime purchases that they put through the auto ship method, or they get free shipping on all auto ship shipments. There's usually some form of an incentivization because there is real business value to having customers or a significant portion of your customers on some form of auto ship or subscription model. And so in the DTC world, incentivizing that is just the norm. It's absolutely common. I don't necessarily see in the B2B world that incentivization is necessarily always the biggest impact you will see.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes B2B businesses are missing a trick if they don't introduce even some minor form of incentivization that says, hey, you're buying from us on a regular basis anyway, and you're generating the POs anyway. So why wouldn't we want to put you on some form of auto ship with us? And as a little sweetener to get you to, because it's a change in process from their side, right? There's a change that they will have to do on their side in some way. So there is a little bit of a barrier to adoption there. And so I'm wondering if incentivization needs to be at least considered by the major B2B players.
I think so. And the way I think you hit the nail on the head, because you were making it sound like very much like this one-to-one relationship, right? Like we're trying to enable this, right? So if you're thinking it through that kind of lens, then yes. So again, any B2B systems that I've seen put into place from a subscription standpoint, there's an adoption time because people are not used to doing that. So a lot of B2B subscriptions, they're lower volume as a percentage of total like overall order count than they are necessarily compared to a typical D2C subscription business. So that's fine. If you're looking at automating maybe a certain subset of SKUs, like you're selling air filtration systems, the main system you buy up front, and then all the filters and everything you're trying to put on an auto ship. When we're talking about specific SKUs that we're trying to put on auto ship, then it makes a lot of sense to put some kind of discount in that process. And then you're already going to add this element of, hey, we all know how hard it is to remember to order filters or to figure out that timing. We're going to automate that for you. And as an extra incentive to try this new system, this new process, we're going to give you 5% off for the next 6 months. Thinking through that, right? As you mentioned, there's a lot of different perks that go into that. But yes, if you think about this, there's an adoption process, right? So the first 6 months, the first year that we're doing this, we're going to spend a lot of time and effort trying to educate people, trying to adopt this program. And that might not, a mass email campaign or a pop-up on the website might not be enough just to get everybody to noticing that and understanding what's happening. So you might have to do some more calls, some more one-to-one emails, and there might need to be a layer of pricing incentive. Another really common one is if you're going from invoices, but companies want to be able to use a credit card. So now one of the benefits of doing it through this online digital side is that you're going to be able to start taking credit cards. Having to eat that processing fee, that is enough to offset, right? As it from a discount standpoint, we're going to now allow you to use your credit card, which you get points and all this other stuff on. We're going to eat the processing fee as an incentive for you to be able to pay for that. So there's a lot of ways you can play with that. I think one of the things that Again, the opportunity with the B2B side is to be very personal, very, very real. Everybody's dealing with suppliers and bottom lines and processes. So if you're upfront without being overwhelming, this is something we're implementing. These are the reasons we think that it's important to you and why it'll be valuable for you and your business. Click here as an extra incentive. You can try this, and then as follow-ups, wanted to get feedback from people if they've tried it or not, why not, all of those types of things. So you got to think about it more as a process from an implementation standpoint, instead of, hey, we're going to flip this switch and suddenly we're going to have a bunch of subscription orders.
Yep, couldn't agree more. Final question for you. I think, at least from my perspective, and then this is where the question comes in, I think probably one of the single biggest influencers of the future of subscriptions for B2B is telematics and telemetry in specific industrial verticals. To me, this feels like one of the most unexploited opportunities today. If you think of heavy equipment that needs service intervals after a certain number of hours, and you've got to change hydraulic fluid, you got to change oil, you got to do these services, these regular services on industrial equipment, from robotics to anything you can imagine that is an industrial good, they usually have service intervals, and more they have communication systems on board that are communicating wirelessly with a telematics system that's saying, okay, this machine has done 5,000 lifts. Now this needs to be replaced. Oh, this machine has done 1,000 hours. It needs XYZ done to it. It feels to me like this is almost one of the single biggest frontiers I can see moving forward in the B2B world, is saying, okay, my subscription isn't going to be on a specific interval, but it is going to be based on the service requirements of the field equipment or machinery that I'm using. And with the automated telematics systems that are being deployed across almost everything in the world, especially through IoT, this is now starting to become a place where I feel that this would bring such massive value to the customer that, like, why wouldn't they say yes to that? Why wouldn't I just automatically ship a case of hydraulic fluid to you? Why wouldn't I ship a barrel of XYZ to you, or these components, or these parts, these bushings, whatever it is? It feels like that to me seems like such an underexploited opportunity. That feels like a massive place where this automation could become hugely valuable.
Yeah. So just as a quick little juxtaposition here, like in the D2C side, okay, there's a company out here in Utah where I am called Pura. They sell fragrance systems, right? You plug them into your home, like an Airwick or something like that. You can load a fragrance, and they've developed like an app that tracks like how much you have, and so that you can see how much is left in the scent diffuser so that you can order. So they're right on the cusp of rolling out technology where that's going to be fully automated and reorder it for you. Okay. Those are like 20, 50, maybe a couple $100 worth of a system or sense that you're buying on like a monthly basis. Now let's talk about the example you used. A $10 million machine that is being used that has repair and upkeep costs of several $100,000 a year from labor, parts, supplies, all these things. And companies that are facing huge costs around something being delayed, a machine not being updated correctly, something didn't get replaced on the right time frame. And trust me when I say, as somebody who's actually worked in the heavy equipment rental space, a $10 machine that can't show up for a day or a half day is usually tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in lost sunk costs into a project. Now we're talking about what you're mentioning is not only just being able to put a replacement for, say, this $10 million machine. You can think of your car as an example for anybody's listening. When your car rolls off the lot, you buy a brand new car, they already know the typical replacement times for air filters, oil filters, tires, windshield wiper fluid, all this stuff based off of tons and tons of data they've got. And now cars have incredible amount of sensors. These huge machines we're talking about, trucking, like long distance trucking, thousands of sensors that are on board and active at any time reporting what's going on. So if you know that you're supposed to get an oil change at the 5,000 mile mark, but now because you drive in a really dry place, you're in Utah, your system's telling you, hey, based on what we're seeing from a level, we actually should get our oil changed at 4,000 miles instead of 5,000 miles. So you as a person can get that message triggered to you, and you can say, okay, and then now it's all getting moved forward, or the system can be automated to do that for you based off of what we've seen, best practices, and to preserve the cost of your vehicle and potential like damages and other issues. We're moving this up automatically. So the scale of this is, like you mentioned, I was trying not to grin too much like the Cheshire Cat when you mentioned this example, because I do think that is the single biggest application and the most lucrative, time saving, all these things. If you think about the truck that has a specific part that's being used for it, and it knows it needs to get replaced, and they're across the country from where their replacement or their fulfillment center is, their repair system. Auto ship means it knows where the truck is. It can deliver the filter there. It knows where it's going to be in 2 weeks or 6 weeks based on the scheduling, and it can be shipped right there, and it can be replaced right on time every time, instead of you having to go out and buy something to have it be overnighted or all these extra costs that go into. And that is where I think is most exciting on the B2B side.
Awesome. I'm glad we're seeing the same things in the market emerge. It's super exciting, isn't it? Now,
Absolutely.
as we come to the end of our time together, I like to turn the microphone over to my guests, and I like to let them ask me one question, any question they like, can be personal or professional. So, Matthew Holman, what's your question for me today?
I'm really curious about how you find, from a sales standpoint, with some of the enterprise customers you work at. Like, how does that work for you? Is it a lot of times people coming to you asking you about, hey, how do I fix this? Or is it a conversation that starts and you have to pick it up again? Because I've had some of those too as well. I'm just curious about of your process of getting people to have you. We're trying to convince people to pay us to help them, but we can't help them. So I'm curious about how you experience that process.
Yeah, it's a variety of ways, but I would honestly say that 80 to 90% of the inquiries that come through my virtual door are because of my content. So it's because of conversations like this. It's because of posts to LinkedIn. It's because of posts to Reddit. It's because you have an opportunity to demonstrate expertise in a specific area in some way. And someone might not even need that expertise in the moment where they consume that content, but you now are top of mind if 6 months later or 12 months later, they're going through, say, a replatform project and they're going, we don't even know where to start. Oh, but this Jason guy, he seems like he would be really helpful in our
Right.
situation because I've seen some content, I've heard some content, or somebody's recommended his content to me. And all of a sudden now it feels like a good fit. Then there's the referrals that come from existing clients. There's the referrals that come from technical partners who know that I'm a specialist in their technology. And then there's referrals that come from agency partners where they might get a client through the door who isn't quite ready to engage with an agency yet. They don't even know how to do their own internal discovery. They don't know how to define or document their own requirements. They don't know how to refine their process or do business process optimization or organizational design or data design around product data, customer data. They don't even know how to get ready to adopt digital channels into their business. And they go, we simply do not know where to start. And we don't want to make massive investments that are the wrong investments. We want to make sure they're the right
Right.
investments that are going to get us from genuinely point A, where we are today, to where we want to be in the future. We want someone to hold our hand and help us roadmap a journey getting from point A to point Z. And that's really genuinely how it usually works. It's very rarely, it's extremely rare. I would say it's sub 10% that just maybe run across my profile for some reason on LinkedIn and then reach out and say, oh, because of your website or because of your profile, we
Right.
thought of reaching
Right.
out to you. It's usually almost every single, because I don't do any cold outbound, almost every single opportunity that comes through my virtual door is warm in the sense that they knew of me before they reached out to me.
That makes
That's
sense.
generally the rule.
All right. That's a lot of
And
opinion
I'm
on it,
sure it's that
definitely
way with
too.
you
So
too, because you're
it
everywhere. So
is.
I'm sure it's the same.
But yeah, that's the whole thing, is like scaling up though, like the relevant thing and connecting content to what actually people are going to want to buy as well. Absolutely.
It's exciting times. Listen, Matthew, I'm going to put links to all of your contact details, LinkedIn profile, everything. But how do you prefer people typically get a hold of you?
Absolutely. Connect with me on LinkedIn, Matthew Holman, or you can check out some more of my content at thesubscriptiondoc.com.
Amazing. Mate, you are the subscription doc. You are the subscription guru. So I encourage anybody who's interested in exploring subscriptions for their business to reach out to you and have a conversation. I super appreciate your time today, mate. Are you a B2B or D2C e-commerce merchant? Then head over to greenwoodconsulting.net to learn how we can help you scale your business.